All right. Well, good morning. For those of you that are watching this, just know that we are, and I know he's too humble to say this, but we're in the presence of some truly great gentlemen. And I've known about Nick Lowery for a long time when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs, before with the Jets, and just you know I've always admired people who excel on any level of anything, but professional athletes to me have just always had a really keen spot in my heart. Probably because I knew I could never be a professional athlete, but I love what you have to go through to do that. But so that's when I first got familiar with Nick Lowery. Then, fast forward many years, I'm friends with Lee Steinberg. He's friends with Lee Steinberg. I see these posts, and he'll comment on Lee's, and Lee's will comment on him, and I'm like, that's really cool. I'd like to get to know that guy. And just last week, we were down in San Diego, and a mutual friend of ours, Sharon Lechter, New York Times bestseller, amazing woman, introduces us. And I'm like, perfect. This is just a great opportunity. So that's how I actually got to meet personally Nick. And you guys, I got to tell you, watching him speak on stage, knowing a little bit of his background, and then meeting him face to face and just talking to him briefly, I've really even got a higher level of respect for who he is. And if you know me, you know that I talk about who you are is more important than what you do, because who you are will determine the quality of everything that you do. And so, Nick, I just want to tell you that it's been a pleasure in the last week to just kind of have a few exchanges. And thank you for agreeing to hop on here so that we can kind of get to know you a little bit differently.
Well, my pleasure. Those are all really nice things that you said, Bob. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. Sharon Lechter, she's led our financial literacy training for Native American youth for, I don't know, at least 10 years. Yeah. And I've helped her out with the Thrive Time financial literacy game she's done with the state, and was very happy to support her in lobbying for it, successfully getting a bill passed to require some minimal level of financial literacy in Arizona. The problem in Arizona, though, is there are 330 school districts, and they call them districts. They're like old, farms from back in the ranch days, and it makes it hard to make it effective. But what we do as leaders is we notice what happens when we get something done. We learn from it. We adjust. And so now we're beginning to get a little bit more teeth in that. She's also been working on the national level. But that's just one example of, when you work with somebody, you get to see how they are, not just in principle, not just in theory, but getting it done, and then having the commitment, like a lot of those people in the room where we met this weekend, to do whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's just falls in line with total congruency with your storyline. I mean, as you shared from the stage, and then as I've gone on and read more about it, it's like you were cut from how many teams before you were playing?
By 8 teams, rejected, tryouts. Some teams I didn't make. I just was rejected in tryouts, but I kept going in different tryouts in 1978, played briefly with the Patriots, and then all these different teams, from the Chargers to the Colts to the New Orleans Saints and Cincinnati Bengals and Redskins and Jets. And it was frustrating, but at the same time, I could tell that I was getting better. And so the best lesson of all was, we hear the cliche, don't just fall down, get back up. That's how you're measured. But when you get up, you may also notice that the fear and the pain of the rejection is slightly smaller. And each time you do it, it's less about that worry and more about just being more yourself. So that's another interesting part of that journey, is not becoming someone else so much as becoming more who you always were.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I like that. Not becoming someone else, but becoming more of who you always were. I like that statement. One of the things that I loved about that story is that not only did you keep getting back up, but it seems like you came back with even a greater vengeance each time, or vengeance may be the wrong word, but with a greater determination. Like when you talked about going to Foxborough, showing up, just kind of showing up, and the coach just happens to be there
Yes.
after the hours are typically he's gone, or you would think most coaches would be gone, but they're normally they're really late. But you showed up and he allowed you to kick for him, with no lights.
Well, actually, there were lights on in the stadium. He had to have them turned, back on a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just me and Chuck Fairbanks. And I'd been driving for 2.5 hours with my buddy David Corey. So he was there catching the balls behind the goalpost. And I had this, bag of footballs. And I just nailed everything all the way back to 53 yards. And he's like, that's pretty good. And then they had a Monday night game, and they kept me up at the Red Fox Inn, which is just on Route 1. And in that game, the Patriots went ahead with a few seconds left, and then Gerald Wilson, totally by coincidence, the former punter for the Chiefs for 15 years, now he's finishing his career with New England. He had to kick off because John Smith, the kicker for the Patriots, had a bad leg. And he kicks a line drive, and Joe Washington picks it up, and it's one of the famous returns in Monday Night Football history because he literally zigzags through the whole team and beats the Patriots on the last play. So they actually signed me the next day because they figured I'd kick off better than Gerald Wilson. And we won both games, against the Raiders, just terrified in Oakland, just a month after Gerald Stingley had been paralyzed.
Wow.
And he's still in the hospital there. So there's just an incredible emotional intensity there because Jack Tatum had refused to apologize, even though it was a legal hit. He didn't have to apologize. He probably could have just said, listen, I'm not apologizing for the hit. It was legal, but I do feel bad that he's hurt. But he never would say that, which is really too bad. But the game then had this extra level of intensity, and it goes down to the final minute. It's 14-all. And my friend Carl Lopp, who ironically had grown up next door to Hank Stram, was watching the game on Sunday Night Football, the first Sunday night game ever, with Dandy Don Meredith, Frank Gifford, and Howard Cosell. And Howard Cosell is apparently narrating as he would do, saying, there goes the tall, angular one from Dartmouth College, Dome Lowery, which, I hate the word Dom, so I've always been Nick. And he goes, can he handle the pressure? And I'm on the sidelines like, luckily, a guy named, Steve Grogan, on third down from the 24, runs all the way around to his left down to the 2-yard line, so I didn't have to kick that field goal. But each one of those was a reference to what I had to be ready for. And so I love the idea that the kicker is the analogy of the kicker, the image, the role, the model of the kicker is not unlike what a lot of us have to do in life, which is be prepared for anything and never know exactly when it's going to come. So we have to train so we're always ready. An emotional, if we will, SWAT team in a good way, and so each time I did that, I got more and more ready. How on earth are you going to get used to that? 1.25 seconds, the ball's not spinning for maybe 1/10 of a second before you kick it. You're moving as the ball's coming towards you. Then you've got those Raiders, 20 feet away that average, 6'5" with a 35-inch vertical leap and 35-inch arms. And so you got to not only be accurate, you got to kick it over those goons, paid lots of money, especially now,
right,
to kill you or block your kick. And that's another analogy too. As good as we are, there are people competing that don't want us to succeed. So I love that because then it circumscribes the one thing, always the mantra for all of us, which is I can't control anybody else, but I can control me. I can take care of me. And that's the key thing for all of us. If we take care and create that office, that whether it's the artist and his craft to be focused and practice his art, your art, doing an interview, writing, being a doctor, all those things, they require just a discipline. And I'm turning off my computer, so hopefully I won't have that noise anymore. And that's a great teacher, because now you stop worrying so much about what people think and worry about and enjoy the process of that God-given love fest between God's gifts in you and your ability to bring them out.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I loved when you were sharing it with the audience the other day, and you had all the people come up. You had those guys come up and line them. And Carlos Segueri, man, that guy is massive. and
That's a big man.
Yeah, he's a big man. And for him, then to line up in front of you like you had them do, and you showed the illustration that you have to not only in a short distance get the ball up and over, but then you've got to still get the distance for the goal, of course. And I thought it was such a great illustration, and the way you drew it to the correlation of how we have to do that every day in life. And I love what you just said, that no matter how good we are, there are always people there that don't want us to succeed.
Because if we succeed, it might remind them that they gave up before they could have themselves. And who wants to feel like they failed themselves? So sometimes we're mirrors unintentionally to others' failures, and that's their own journey. But of course, jealousy is an issue really that has to do with self-esteem. But don't apologize for being confident that you have a purpose in life that's yours. Don't apologize for that. Don't apologize that you have a skill. Certainly empathy is a thing you don't have to sacrifice, but not at the expense of your own empathy and appreciation and self-confidence and focus. Isn't it great that you're doing what you were intended to do, which always isn't just about you, but your capacity to help others as well.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. Well said. I always say that any minute that you and I operate from less than our absolute best, the world is operating from a deficit. And I love the way you illustrate how you tie in the football. But let's talk about you personally, because it seems like you've always had a clear message of what you want to accomplish with your life. I mean, you've been in politics, you've been in philanthropy, you've been, even when you weren't playing football, you were about your education, about politics, about those kind of things, service.
I didn't have time to go into all that stuff, but just I think about two next door neighbors. Just forget everything else. Who has had two next door neighbors, one of whom was just newly minted as a Supreme Court justice for John F. Kennedy, where Bobby Kennedy himself was in their front yard, our next door neighbor, the very first day they were there, and who ended up not only being a 31-year Supreme Court justice and a swing vote on the Supreme Court, who before that had led the marshals in Selma, Alabama to protect them during the civil rights era of the early 60s. And this guy also happened to have been #1 at Yale Law School. The same year he led the National Football League in rushing for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then 2 years later for the Detroit Lions. I mean, and to have a role model like that in the middle of Washington, D.C., with a next door neighbor, and my father, who had been senior CIA, being around those people, all of whom were making contributions, all of whom, if they hadn't fought in World War II, they played a role and they were servants to the country. They understood how beautiful that is. And then many years later, like 50 years later, a guy named Muhammad Ali, 2 doors down from me in Cheney Estates, for 12 years until he died. And totally different stories, but not only were they the greatest athletes of their generations in many ways, but obviously 2 of the greatest people, frankly, in the history of this country and maybe this world. Muhammad Ali, to me, is the supreme example of someone that potentially, as a Muslim, could have united Jew and Muslim, Christian, and everyone behind this notion that he himself would deem as love. What a concept for a fighter in a violent sport to come back to compassion and love for all people. It's just tragic that we didn't have his world-class, best ever voice for those last 15, 20 years of his life, because I think we'd be a much better world for it. But to have him next door or 2 doors down and to get to know him reasonably well and his family, what a gift. I've been completely, whatever the word is above spoiled, Bob, really spoiled with that. And so how would I not want to do something with that? How would I not want to honor that person? I mean, that's just, to me, there's the gift. Now I got to honor that. And so I believe my life is really about carrying the torch of John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And Muhammad Ali, which is really ask what the world can do for you, but what you can do for the world.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I mean, you've hit so many points right there. You know, like you say, you've had so many great experiences in your life, so many great influences in your life. If you had to pick the one that really has led you to be the man that you are today, the one that has made you the most well-rounded, made you the most influential, made you the most caring, loving, everything, is there one that you think just has really paved the way for you in that area?
One person?
Yeah.
Oh, well, my parents, number one. I think if you're lucky enough to have parents, my father was in the first group of Fulbright scholars. My mother was in the first full class of women at Oxford, and she helped run this first Fulbright Scholars Program. And she'd been in England in the Women's Royal Navy. She actually, I found out after her passing only a few years ago that because she was basically spoke literally the best German in England, if not anywhere. She'd studied Hochdeutsch, an honor student at Oxford. And she was sent to not only at the conclusion of the war question Hitler's record keepers in Berlin and Minden, but I found out that actually a month before that, she had been at the death camps and was asked to document them, and actually ran a presentation about those in London in a formerly bombed out building she turned into and was rebuilt, I think for the express reason to prove that it really did happen. And that, and I think about that level of sacrifice. My father, who couldn't talk about what he did, he was actually chief of station. He was the American M, literally in James Bond years in the mid-60s, from 65 to 67. My dad quietly ran the CIA in London, and in pretty important years, and the Cold War, et cetera. Yeah. And so to have parents that have that level of love and wisdom, that they didn't burden you with the pain that they've been through, but they burdened you with the sense of just constancy, of commitment, of dependability, and of course love. I mean, every day my mother would present all of us with a beautiful cup of tea first thing in the morning and first thing when we got home. Those little things, you look back and go, how many people have that consistency? My parents would never fight. The worst I ever heard was when my mom and dad, because I think I bring this up because no relationship, no person is perfect. I worked for 4 presidents. I've met some great people. Nobody's perfect. But, even when they fought, the worst my mother would say, that you never heard them swear, was my mother would say, God's flaming teeth. Because there was love and there was respect. So that would be my first answer. My second answer would probably be, I've had some amazing ones. Yeah. It would probably be Dick Johnson, who was this retired stockbroker who coached me as a kicker. And from day one, he just literally come back from his deathbed. So he was grateful. God was always in the room. Purpose was always in the room, and helping me realize how grateful I should be, and recognize that purpose, a chance that everything I did that day would make a difference. And then make sure I understood that as good a kicker as I already was, that I would only be great by being mentally tough and being able to focus and not be the usual flaky teenager. And then he went through and coached me through college and coached me my first 10 years in the NFL. We'd start every year down in St. Albans with the shadow of the cathedral, the National Cathedral in Mount St. Albans, literally behind the backstop of the baseball field. And I'd practice kicking at these 8-foot wide targets, which were essentially this baseball backstop, kicking off the dirt. And he'd have his director's chair. And he'd sit there. At this point, he's probably 75, 78 years old. And but those things that he taught me were the discipline, the living in the moment, and also to be aware that the angels and God was always there too. Sort of remind you, one of my favorite words, to remind, to refresh the mind every day that something you do today is every day can be crucial. Most importantly, start with you. Make sure you're realizing this is a gift, and give that to other people. And he was that way. So all those times I could have given up, all those 11 times, and then the final story, which you heard, which I haven't told too often, was I had given up. I took a job as one of the only 2 non-attorneys on the Senate Commerce Committee for Senator Bob Packwood in the United States Senate, working on commerce, science, and transportation, and specifically on aviation deregulation and decentralization of airports. Pretty exciting stuff. And then aviation safety. And I get this call from Jim Schaaf. I'd never heard of him before, the general manager for the Chiefs. And I already had 2 contracts on my desk from Cleveland and Baltimore, and I just had ignored them. But here's this guy from the Chiefs calling, and I said, thanks, but no thanks, and hung up. Yeah. And the second I hung up, I thought, well, I should have found out what he had to offer. And there I had Dick Johnson, the same Dick Johnson who'd been coaching me and mentoring me for all these years, say, well, you know what, Nick, you will always wonder. You might want to find him. So I spent the next, hour finding him with no phone number, not knowing where he lived, not knowing how to spell his name. Found him in his bed at Research Hospital, which blew him away. There's no GPS, no internet, no cell phones. And they flew me in and they gave me a $2,500 bonus, which just symbolically, it's just the funny thing is in life, for those of you looking for that sense of, gosh, God, give me a sign. I'm supposed to be doing something special today. Yeah. That was, even though it was money, it was more the sign, that little bit. I mean, it was $2,500. It wasn't, $100,000 or something. It was just enough, just what I needed. And I spent that on my first car. I've been using the family car for a long time and never had my own car. And I got a silver Volkswagen Scirocco with a spoiler. And on May 1st, I left the United States Senate and drove out on Route 70 all the way down to Kansas City, spent a month there, and realized I'm going against the greatest kicker in the history of the game at that point, Jan Stenerud. But there's another key point is in 2 years, we talk about 1 month or 6 months. In 2 years, I went from all these rejections to being confident, not really cocky, just confident I had a good shot to beat out this iconic guy that had been my favorite kicker. We were built the same. He was 6'3" and lanky, and the only remaining member of the Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs team. And I had to outkick him every day at everything, with Marv Levy watching, former special teams coach for the Redskins, and with Clark Hunt, Lamar Hunt's son, at 16 years old, charting every single kick, how far it was, how quickly they went off. And every day being competing like that, which is not unlike what a lot of us are going through. Somebody's watching, somebody's measuring, somebody's judging. But I was now ready for that. And it was, by the way, Bob, it averaged 107 degrees every day in training camp. And, just to add that too, and the humidity of the Midwest. But I was ready. And so all of those rejections made sense. And sometimes the rejections don't make sense at all. Maybe most of the time. Right. And many times they're unfair. But when it's meant to happen, and I say it's God's timing. Yeah. My part of the contract is to do everything I can to be as good as I can. But then I've got to allow God to take it over and say, okay, now this is where it's really going to be special.
Yeah. How did you, obviously you're doing other things when you've decided to put football on the shelf for a little bit, and you're doing other things. How did you get mentally back into that? You're going to walk on the field and you're expected to kick. I don't know how many days you were kicking in a row during that time. How did you do that?
Well, I started earlier before when I would go to training camp the previous season with the Cincinnati Bengals. And by the way, the head coach then, Homer Rice, when he cut me, he said, Nick, I don't ever remember seeing you miss. I'm like, you idiot. Why are you cutting me? But anyway, it wasn't my time. And now the Chiefs, instead of late July when training camp starts, or mid-July, late July, it was May 1st that I really focused on that, and that extra almost 3 months got me to a higher level even so. And being there in Arrowhead Stadium with the veterans, being less intimidated, I think that's important. When you're going to raise your game, it kind of helps to be around the guys you're going to compete with and against. And you begin to think, they're humans too.
Yeah.
And also maybe if I put this at work and I learn how to focus even more with discipline, maybe I'll be better than them. Maybe I'll be more able and committed and focused to get better. And I can't worry about them in any way. I'll just make sure I do more than I've ever done and always constantly look to get better. That's the other part, is the lack of complacency, which in our workforce today is a major issue. And on NFL teams, guys that are making money and kind of lose track, instead of being grateful that they're making, $1 million, $2 million, right? How many people get to do that? Or 20 million.
Right.
So many lose track with how lucky that is.
Yeah.
And what would be the better way to say thank you than to just love the work? So that was the other message we had on Friday, was love the work. If you fall in love with the work, good things will happen.
Yeah. Love that. We, I was very blessed to be able to go speak to our U.S. military in Germany and in Italy about 2 years ago. And it's something I'd always wanted to do, and it just fell on my desk. And I said yes after 20 years of waiting, and finally got an opportunity. And I was sitting there the night before I was going to be on base speaking. We're having dinner with one of the commanding officers, and this colonel, 30-year colonel, sitting there, and he turns to me and goes, "So Bob, tell me how I can be an even better leader." And I'm like, "Sir, you've been doing this 30 years. You've got thousands under your command." And he says, "Bob, no matter how good I am, I can always be better." And I remember looking at him and saying, with that attitude, our military is in really good hands.
Here's another thought too. One of my heroes, he wasn't the same as Dick Johnson, but my senior year, I had a class with Arthur Mayer, who was 93, and his wife Millie, 88, was in the audience. And he had this packed class, was on the history of film. Wow. He would spend the winters in Stanford, and then he would spend the spring at Dartmouth. And I remember walking with him from his house, very slowly, but still, and back from the lecture with him. And it was all about, Millie, I forgot that such and such story. I did this. And I thought, that's the way I want to be. I want to be right up to the end of my life. Yeah. Tomorrow, I'll get it even better. I did okay today, but tomorrow I'll get it even better. I think people that retire, so there's remind is my favorite word, Bob. Maybe my least favorite is retire, which is repetitive and fatigued or tired. Never retire. Simply re-engage, redefine your purpose, and maybe refine it. Maybe you have time now to do the one thing you always wanted to do that you'll never regret, and it usually surrounds some form of service. Could just be one person. Could be a family member that you inspire and help them take their life to another level. Or it could be, something very different. Champions for the Homeless we talked about. That's, along with other things we do with our foundation, that gives back to me 1,000-fold. I get to bring in amazing musicians, and I see another side of people, and I see them suddenly realize, this is my best side. Why have I not done more of that? Then I see their children go, I've never felt this power before to help a homeless person just by loving on them, serving them. And that's also good for us athletes who are part of a narcissistic, self-indulgent culture, once again, to remind us what really matters, to remind us that we're not all that, and to use the power we do have and the gifts we do have for something bigger. And you see that. You see a lot of good stories about that. And fortunately, the news, for some reason, talk about fatigued. The fatigued old model of network news, which is, tornadoes and deaths and fires and murders, and maybe one or two feel-good stories, about a puppy that was, yesterday it was a puppy that was lost in a traffic accident. The lady found it. You know, those are great stories. I love those. But why do we find news as tragedy itself as opposed to the heroic ability of people in the shadows without the cameras every day doing great things?
Right. So true. So true. You know, I saw a study not too long ago where they were doing some research, and they in a crowded area, they had somebody drop a wallet as they were walking in a crowded area. And they wanted to see how many people would pick up the wallet and just keep walking versus how many. And over the course of a full day of this happening over and over and over again, only one showed indication that they wanted to keep the wallet. Everyone else was like running over, grabbing the person, tapping them on the shoulder, hey, hey, the wallet. They're like, how come the one is the one that always gets attention?
Right.
What made me think about that was when you shared your story about kick after kick after kick going right through the uprights, and then somebody calling out the one you miss.
Yeah. Well, that's leadership, right? So there's another corollary of the news cycle, which is to get attention. There's a sort of weird subliminal thing that happens where it touches, and we pay more attention to the accident on the side of the road, and people going 80 miles an hour slow down to 20. And nothing's blocking the road, but they've got to look. I'm like, you know, you can slow down to 40, but it's a weird thing. And the same thing is true in the leadership model, that you just have to understand unfair criticism will absolutely be part of what you sign up for, because you've got more people, more and more and more, and sometimes thousands of people watching you, if not even millions. I mean, an NFL Monday night game could be 20, 30 million people, or a playoff game. And there are going to be people out there, some knuckleheads, as my friend Michael Ray Wilbon would say on ESPN. And you can't worry about them. You know, certainly you want to allow information to come in to give you feedback to do better things, the way that military leader asked you how he could do things better. That's important. So you give space for that. But the reality is, you know, there it was 22 for 23. An NFL record for percentage.
Wow.
And I'm at a Quick Trip store, and this lady's like, I know you're Nick Lowery. Yeah, I saw you miss that field goal. What's wrong with you? And I'm like, you know, but that's just the way it is. And I think if you understand that comes with the territory, then you don't take it so personally. And I can be a sensitive guy. You know, I don't want to trade having empathy and being sensitive. If that allows me to connect with people at a deeper level. But there are times when you also have to mitigate that. You have to balance that with being tough.
Yeah.
And also not transferring somebody else's negative energy into your own, and lowering yourself to, you know, I think of Winston Churchill, the famous story where the lady said, Mr. Churchill, you're drunk. And he said, yes, my dear lady, and tomorrow I shall be sober, and you, unfortunately, will still be ugly. And I'm not sure if that's really positive energy, but only Churchill could turn that into something like that. But you know, keeping it positive, and being realistic that there'll always be unfair criticism. Because then, guess what? Then maybe you go up an even higher level of influence and skill set, and there'll still be those opportunities to get better. I'm sure you're thinking right now, this interview, there's some good things, but how can we do it better? And that's part of being alive.
Sure. Yeah, you know, I love what you said, where you experience things, and then you make room for the feedback to come back so that you can make adjustments where it's necessary. You know, when you said that, it just struck me, because a lot of times we think mental toughness, you have to block everything out. And at the same time, when you said you have to allow some feedback in so that you can adjust and become better, where's the balance? How do you do that? Because it's either all or nothing sometimes with some of us.
Well, I think while you're performing, you've got to be tough and get it done. But I know when I've done a good job speaking, I feel like every cell in my body has been there. And afterwards, I'm left with this beautiful gift of feeling alive and alert and present. That's a really good sign.
Yeah.
You know, a big part to me, when people say, I've got to give a speech tomorrow, what do I say? I say, I'll tell you what, know your subject 5 times, or no 5 times more than you need. But then when you get there, speak from the heart. Because if you've done that, people will know that you've stripped away. You've been transparent with them and real with them, and that's the best gift you can give. But anyway, I guess you just keep working to get better.
Well, I liked what you said. When you're in the midst of the game,
right,
you block everything else out. Afterwards, you let the coach say, you could have done this, you could have done this, whatever, or you allow that feedback to make you better. And then you get to decide whether you want to take that and adjust or not.
And you got to care. I mean, that's part of it. It's just, if you care, then it's good. I mean, it's good to not feel good if you didn't do well. But then, of course, when it sabotages your confidence or your enthusiasm to do the work, then maybe it's not so good. So, but, I just got more used to it. I was not liked by my teammates at first because they all knew Jan Stenner, and he was like a father figure to them. But then when I hit a 57-yard field goal and a 50-yarder and set an NFL record, my very first field goals for the Chiefs, first time any kicker had ever had 2 50-yarders in a game, and the 57-yarder literally was near the top of the net. It could have gone 65 yards easily. And that was a powerful statement. And that's kind of cool when you surprise even yourself. So I could have had a better career. I do know I got better as I went along. And I left on that speech, by the way. You remember at the end, one of the things I talked about was the analogy of how I handled and learned to handle through trial and error, mistakes, etc., the big kicks. So the moments of truth. And I gave the analogy of left foot and explode, which was as I'm moving towards the football, my left foot, I'd say left foot, which was putting my left foot down at the target, was aligning myself just like us, making sure we're aligning our goals with the purpose that really matters. And then explode was attack the ball. Don't hold back. Doesn't mean try to kill it, but it means attack the ball and attack life. Once you've done your homework, attack life, because that's a signal to God's gifts in you, which are 100,000 times more complex and beautiful that we're not even aware of. And you're giving license, you're opening the key to let those happen. So then if you make a mistake, you'll know it was your best self making the mistake, and now you can make an adjustment. But if you instead held back and said, whether it's the pitcher says, I need to throw it 2 inches outside, or, I'm having trouble getting the lower pitch called by the referee, or in this case is the kicker. I'm looking at the ball, but maybe I better aim farther right because that wind's strong. No, trust that decision and go for it. And so here's the analogy. When you trust your natural flow, the brain itself shifts from the large muscle groups that it controls when it's self-conscious. And when you trust it and explode, it has the whole brain working. So the finite kinesthetic touch takes place. It's the same reason why a huge, muscly offensive lineman can't crack a whip, but the skinny guy can because he's got that flow and that snap. Well, that snap's pretty important in life. And so by attacking the ball, left foot, lining my values and attacking the ball, I suddenly started making an even higher percentage of the big kicks. And to me, that was a great lesson that the winds of adversity, if you think of it this way, the average kicker, the ball starts to slow at about 35 yards. Powerful kicker, maybe more like closer to 40 yards. So if you're attacking the ball doesn't slow down until 40 yards, so the wind can't blow it. When it starts slowing down, the wind will blow it farther. If you attack the ball, the outside influence doesn't affect it as much. And I think that's true. When we attack with confidence and congruency, the outside, for want of a better phrase, BS or wind or noise is less important and affects it less, and it stays true longer.
Wow, I like that. That's a great analogy. When you, I know you encounter young football players now that are, making the millions of dollars, and they've, I think they've arrived at life. What's your feedback to them when you experience them? And I don't give unsolicited feedback, so people would have to ask me to give them. But you're in a position where probably you do get asked, or you feel like you can at least shed some light on it for them. What do you say to those guys that just think that they've they've arrived and that nothing's going to ever happen to them.
You know, I've been so lucky in life. I'll give you one analogy. This is not to football players, but it's related to having extreme success.
Mm.
So I'm on the red carpet at Celebrity Fight Night, Muhammad Ali's fundraiser.
Oh, wow.
And my dear friend Jessie Coulter is walking with me, and she's going to sing a tribute that her late husband, Waylon Jennings, wrote to his best friend, Muhammad Ali, called Always the Greatest Muhammad Ali. And walking towards me are 4 young men, and they're the Canadian Tenors. And we stopped, and just that energy, I just felt like we could talk about it. And I just talked about how, isn't this great that while we're in the middle of success, we can feel grateful and appreciate it right now. And if you follow the Tenors, Fraser Walters and Remy and Victor, I mean, these are great human beings. And they get it, that it's about being grateful and doing something with that gift. And the same thing is true when I talk with athletes, is the most important thing. Just realize how lucky you are and take advantage of that every day. Celebrate that. And for me, also, when you do have that higher success, like kicking the game-winning field goal in the Pro Bowl, my first year with Steve Largent holding and Jack Lambert there on the wing, and Earl Campbell and Ted Hendricks, and I mean all of Dan Fouts, and these are all Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famers, and just what a dream it was. Yet in the locker room after the game, when the 30 TV cameras had left, I was left with this sense of vacancy and vacuum. And I realized that I had one buddy there, Bob Grupp, the punter and for the Chiefs, but nobody else. I hadn't brought my parents. I hadn't brought the people that were there, whether I made it or not. I hadn't brought the people that would always be there. I hadn't shared it enough. And it's a beautiful lesson at the age of 25 that make sure when you have the big goals to win the Oscar and the Emmy and the Grammy and the whatever it is, and those moments when you're at the top of somebody's mountain or your own mountain even, that you're not alone. That it will feel empty if you don't realize the gift is not the trophy. The gift is the capacity to share it with all the people that were there along the way.
Yeah.
And I can feel that emotion coming up now, because now I have, because of that, memories of mom and dad in the having dinner with Lamar Hunt and Derek Thomas and Neil Smith and my brothers and my whole family the night before the game, the Pro Bowl. Mom and dad seeing me kick the game-winning field goal twice, having dinner with them afterwards, and those are things you'll never regret. And more than that, you'll feel so blessed that you were able to share it, and those memories fill you up, and they're references for the rest of your life.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a great lesson for all of us. And it doesn't matter whether we're playing professional, athletics, or we're just in business or doing anything else, or being just a great parent. I mean, how do you instill that in someone? I mean, you had to learn that the hard way, right? I mean, you had to learn.
I think most people learn it the hard way, and what you do is you plant seeds so that the seeds then help them learn it faster. They're still going to make mistakes, just like I'm going to make mistakes, just like we're all going to make mistakes. Right. But if you planted lots of seeds, then whenever they're supposed to take root, you've helped make sure there are more references. So if you will, if their brain is a bunch of referential pinballs, right? All those little bumpers in a pinball machine, and you've added, instead of 10, there are 1,000. It's a whole lot more likely that something will hit them. They'll go, whoa, that's right. He said that. And I thought about myself differently. And suddenly they're adjusting their behavior because they have so many more references. So it's a trigger, their memory, and a combination of their memory and their identity and how they're measuring themselves as they go through life. And you've given them more references so that they can adjust. Sort of like, here's another analogy. You're the pilot in your own life, but it's all cloudy outside. Can't see anything. So what do you rely on? Are you relying on instruments, or are you relying on the instincts, which are all those references, so that you can pilot yourself sometimes when it's really hard to see where you're going?
Boy. Having that on the inside is really the guidance for you, right?
I think so. And I think you also pick out people. Here's another one. I'm giving you lots of stuff today. Here's another one, very simple, which is any relationship, love relationship, business, friendships of any kind, do I bring out the best in this other person?
Mm-hmm.
And do they bring out the best in me? Do I enjoy bringing out the best in them, and are they bringing out the best in me? That's pretty simple.
Yeah.
We can write a big book with 1,000, psychological quotes and research, but in the end, we know the answer to that. And so we're drawn, and some say it's a frequency, whatever, we're drawn to people where we feel that coming out of them. That's what was happening on the red carpet with the Canadian tenors.
Wow.
And if you haven't heard them, they go by the tenors now. Here's a really cool thing. That same guy, Fraser Walters, who is sort of one of their leaders, I started to mentor him and support him. And less than a year later, he asked me to marry him to his wife to be Kelly Levesque. I wasn't a priest.
Wow.
They had a justice, the priest, do the legal thing the day before. That would never have happened before. So they felt, even though there was an intellectual connection, it was more the spiritual connection, that purpose-filled connection, that to them fulfilled the spiritual values that comprise their notion of what a wedding should be. And so I really can't imagine any greater compliment than that. I got to write the wedding ceremony with them and then perform it with them.
Wow.
And I was there on their 7th anniversary with their baby just this past last summer. And what's better than that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that really is important to me too, is that realizing that we impact different people different ways, and that you impacted them in such a way that you're just having this human experience with them, but you impacted them in such a way that they wanted you to officiate the wedding, which was never even on your radar, wasn't even something you were even contemplating. But yet that's the byproduct of a great connection.
Well, they saw me as a spiritual person, which is like, wow. Right? That maybe my life is in a different place than it was. Not, once again, I love the book by Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, because it's always being able to differentiate between an appetite of your ego and your identity to claw you back to some old identity, and the appetites, if you will, that are unending and infinite of your spirit.
Yeah.
And being able to keep clear on those things. That's it right there.
Powerful. Yeah. When you got done speaking, I remember coming up to you and saying, I know you've had a lot of great accomplishment in your life, but I really see that your gift as an orator to convey messages and tie in your life learning into powerful messages for people. I remember saying, I really think that's your calling. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah. I just really believe that.
Well, we left out something, didn't we? Because I had to kick a field goal, and Sharon Lecter was there, and she's wearing a red outfit, so it's easier to pick her out of the crowd.
Right.
And I didn't want to kick it to her because I didn't want, just in case, because it might have come in a little fast and hard. But and I kicked it just above her, and somebody caught it.
Well, I didn't actually catch it. It actually hit the table. John Shin was there. I was there. It ran to the ground, and I just, I didn't knock him out of the way, but I was very intentional about grabbing the football.
The blood coming out of his nose, you had nothing to do with that.
Had nothing to do with it, and it wasn't on camera, so I'll hold that fact. But yeah, it was a great opportunity. And I was so excited. I'm like, this is great, because I've got some footballs that I love, I love to have from some of my friends that have played in football. And I'm like, I got this football, and then they're auctioning them off, and I'm like, I'll just donate it back.
That was really nice of you.
But it's a great charity, and so and I know that that's something you would do anyways. You would give in a football, and but they had only so many, so I said I'll just give that one. But yeah, it was a great opportunity. It was a lot of fun. I was blown away when you lined the guys up and said, "Yeah, we're going to kick a field goal in this hotel ballroom." I'm like,
with chandeliers,
whole chandelier up there.
Yeah. What I love to say is, somebody was killed last week, but the thing was, they were smiling as the blood flowed out of them because they caught the foot. No.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have fun with it.
I didn't die, so that was a good thing. But no, that was a great experience. I just want to kind of wrap up with you because I want to be valuable, be sensitive to your time. But you know, one of the greatest things I see with people who have influence, and we all have influence, in a different way. But one thing I find with people of influence is some of them shy away from it, and some of them step into it. The fact that you're out speaking now, and spending so much time speaking, the fact that you're involved in so many philanthropic things and so many movements like Sharon Lecter's, and the education for kids and stuff like that, financial literacy. What's the thing right now that has got you the most excited and moving forward?
Well, I think most importantly, just I have a chance to do a number of things. But the one thing right now that's a big priority for me is football was the best thing that ever happened to me. Mm. And the concussion and CTE issue is such a dark cloud. And I've had, whether it's Junior Seau, who was on 2 of those game-winning field goal football teams with me, and, I pictures right after the game celebrating with him with this big, amazing $1 million smile, or Derek Thomas, and Mike Webster, and, just Dwight Clark, Dave Dewerson, all these people Kenny Stabler. I mean, these weren't just great football players. They were incredible people. So why would we want to lose those people? And there will be future people of that caliber. The only thing we are missing is to really face up to this issue and reduce the impact. And so I'm excited to be part of a company called CanLife, which is developing what's called an ethical pharmaceutical, which will be scientifically proven and has already so far in the preclinical trials to be incredibly effective with reducing the effect, or literally the impact of impact, making the cells, the neurons in the brain more resistant, and also incredibly effective with reducing the other part of this CTE tragedy, which is addiction to opioids. Because the guys are in pain and never sleeping, their brain is manifesting, rage issues and self-control issues, memory issues, etc. And then they also, with their pain, they start medicating with these opioids. So CBD, this is a biomimetic CBD, which is 50 times more powerful. I'm excited that, that I feel like my background working in Washington and having a chance to work for 4 different U.S. senators and 3 U.S. presidents, really 4 with W as the chairman of the National Fund for American Indian Education is another lifetime. Wow. About 10 years ago. Those are skill sets I hope that can help just build education so that just the true transparent quality science will prove what works, and we can make decisions now, not 20 years from now, that will preserve the best game in America. So we can, when we see somebody make a good hit that's safe and legal, we'll love it because we're not worried so much. And parents, that rightfully are concerned about their kids and making decisions on what sports to play when they're very young, now those issues can be taken off the table. And that's an element of the greed culture that we can deal with, which is, football's never been more popular. You see so many people that take their success and unfortunately say, I'm richer than ever and screw everybody else. Right. And I'd like to make this as one way to say, wait a minute, catch yourself. Say, I am blessed. Let's do something to really sublimely help that culture from which I was lucky enough to experience my own success, rather than tromp on somebody else. Mm-hmm. And to me, part of that is we're blessed so much with football. You as a player are, you as owners are. Let's be stewards of the game and preserve the best game for generations to come.
I love that message. I've got a question. How do you get through to some of those owners and those players that their ego is just won't allow them to accept that information? How do you get through to them?
You think about all the great leaders that have inspired you, think of all the shouters at Churchill or at Muhammad Ali or at Nelson Mandela or at any of the people that you admire that were great leaders. They don't worry about the noise, and they are just supremely confident, clear, and persistent. And that's the way to be. I mean, change is like that 100-mile-long aircraft carrier that you may help it change 1 degree in its course. And in the end, I'll give you an example. Working with Native Americans, when I started with Native Vision, which was on Oprah as the best new program for Native youth back in 1997, we had a suicide issue. And we were told we can't talk about it. The people from Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health said we can't talk about it because it may create imitations. We can't talk about suicide. It's taboo. Yeah. So last year, my leadership training for Native youth, which I've been doing now for almost 20 years, 2 of the 4 teams chose themselves that teenage suicide was something they wanted to solve with their plan in our program. Yeah. That to me was a sign of real change when something had gone from taboo where we can't talk about it to the kids themselves owning their issue and saying, I'm going to do something about this.
Love it. Love it. The, you know, the choice and the chance and the opportunity that we have to make an impact. And you've used your celebrity, you've used your experience, you've used your life to do that. And so many people, one of my friends played Aaron Pierce on the show 24, a very, very dear friend of mine, an amazing guy. He says, I said, you know, if you could, he speaks. I said, if you could speak or act, which one would you do? And he's been a successful actor for 40 years. And he goes, speak. And I'm like, really? I mean, you've been on all these shows, Transformers, X-Men, West Wing, 24. I mean, come on, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, because he goes, all that did was great for creating an income, but that's what gives me the platform to go out and speak. People will let me speak because I was Aaron Pierce or because I was the general, you know. And I love the fact that people like yourself who've come to the point where you've said that my life, football, whatever, has been the thing that's given me the platform to go out and change the world. And I just want to tell you, thank you for doing that, because
thank you. Look what you're doing.
A lot of people that are sitting back with their life experiences and doing nothing with it, and you're really putting it out there. I really appreciate that.
Well, Bob, you're using a platform right now, and you know, one thing I try to do more consistently is thank the people like Troy Hirsch on Fox Television San Diego last week. Yeah, you're a storyteller by telling this story. You're saying it's important. So I always try to thank the storytellers, and to be one, it's a real honor, and we need to be careful with how we use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick, how do they stay in touch with you? I mean, the people that watch this later, how do you want them to correspond with you, and what do you have coming up that they can participate in and be a part of?
Well, first of all, my email, just send it to admin, ADMIN, at LowerySpeaks.com. That's admin, ADMIN, at LowerySpeaks.com. And then my website, if you want to see the foundation, is nicklowry.org, NICKLOWERY.org. And then at Lowery Nick is Twitter and Instagram. And then it says Nick the Kick on Facebook if you want to find me there. I try to post a lot of fun stuff. But if you want to get in touch with me directly, send an email, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can.
Awesome. Awesome. Nick, once again, I just want to tell you, it was an honor to finally get to connect and meet you in person. It's been an honor to have you on this program, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, and much love and respect for you, for the price you've paid to be who you are today, and for paying that forward. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob. You're a good man.
All right. Everyone, Nick Lowery, please reach out to him, get to know how you can participate in some of the things he's got coming up.
And by the way, this is back in what we call the porn star mustache days. That's Ronald Reagan, and that was when I had a mustache and a really bad haircut. But that was just an example of the little things we can do. That was the Chiefs Crime Card program during National Crime Prevention Week in 1983 or 4. And the Chiefs had a simple idea, which was put football cards on the front and then a crime thing on the back, and suddenly the policeman had something positive to do. And I was able to represent that idea. So there's so many ways we can contribute. And of course, I'm reminded of how ugly my mustache was back then.
I tell you, that's a great thing though. The fact that they would even allow that to be done, right? It was, I mean, that was revolutionary. Nobody was doing that, I don't think, right?
Yeah, that grew from 100,000 to 1 million to 5 million in just a couple of years. And the folks from Lee Jeans helped out with that. So they're just ideas. Stay creative.
Yes,
Always.
absolutely. Touch base with Nick, and Nick, thank you again.
Thank you, Bob. Bless you.
All right. Bye-bye.